Today, everything fell into place. The unease I had been feeling for months, the small details that didn't quite add up, the distant looks, the sudden late meetings, all of it led to this moment. The truth was laid bare in my hands, printed on crisp white paper, as undeniable as the pounding of my own heart. A lease. An entire apartment in my wife's name, sitting in a part of town we had no business in. I found it completely by accident. She had left her purse on the kitchen counter that morning, something she rarely did. Julia was meticulous, always in control, but lately, she had been slipping. I was making coffee when I noticed the corner of an envelope sticking out, stamped with the logo of a real estate agency. My curiosity got the better of me. Inside was the lease agreement, signed 6 months ago. I sat at the table, staring at the document, my coffee going cold. The rent was obscene, more than what we paid for our actual home. My first thought was that she had bought it as a surprise, maybe some kind of investment. But as I read further, my gut twisted into knots. The lease wasn't for an investment. It was a fully furnished apartment, listed under her maiden name. And the next payment was due in 3 days. I ran my hand through my hair, my breathing shallow. There was no reason for her to have a secret apartment. None that made sense, unless it was the one answer I didn't want to believe. My wife was living a double life. The first sign. Looking back, the signs were there. The late-night meetings that didn't make sense, the hushed phone calls, the way she had started locking her phone like it contained national secrets, the scent of cologne that wasn't mine lingering on her clothes, the way she started paying extra attention to her looks when she used to be effortlessly beautiful. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But now, I was staring at the evidence. I clenched the papers in my fist, my pulse hammering. There was an address at the top, downtown, near the expensive high-rises. I had no idea what I would find there, but I had to go. I had to know. A door that shouldn't exist. By the time I reached the building, the afternoon sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the street. It was one of those sleek, glass-covered towers where the rent was high and privacy even higher. The concierge barely glanced at me when I walked in. That told me one thing. Julia had been here before, probably enough times that they assumed I was just another visitor. I took the elevator up to the 18th floor, my hands clenched into fists. When I reached the door, the one I never should have had to stand in front of, I hesitated. I could still turn back. I could pretend I never saw the lease, never came here, never questioned the woman I had spent a decade of my life loving. But I couldn't live with that lie. I pulled out my phone and sent her a text. Me, hey, where are you? Seconds later, the reply came. Julia, still at work. Late meeting. Don't wait up. I stared at her words, my stomach twisting. A lie. I inhaled sharply and pressed my palm against the door, bracing myself. Then, with a slow, deliberate turn, I twisted the handle. It wasn't locked. I stepped inside. A home for a stranger. The air smelled different here, like expensive candles and fresh laundry, too pristine, too untouched, like a hotel that someone barely lived in. My breath hitched as I took in the sight. The apartment was beautiful, modern furniture, dim lighting, soft music playing from hidden speakers. But what struck me most was how unfamiliar it all was. None of this was Julia. A sleek black dress lay draped over the back of a chair, heels kicked off near the couch. Wine glasses sat on the marble counter, 2 of them. One still had lipstick on the rim. My hands shook as I stepped further inside. Then, on the nightstand beside the bed, I saw it. A love letter. My name wasn't on it, but another man's was. AR. Everything inside me went still. I picked up the letter, my hands cold and numb as I unfolded the delicate stationery. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, too perfect. Julia, my love, I miss you already. Counting the hours until I can have you again. You belong in my arms, always. The words blurred as my vision darkened. I barely registered the closing line. Forever yours, AR. I let out a slow breath, my fingers gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled. Julia had not just betrayed me. She had built an entirely separate life. But she had made one fatal mistake. She thought I would never find out. That was about to change. I stood in the middle of the apartment, the letter in my hands, my heart hammering in my chest. Julia had another man. Not just a fleeting affair. Not just a drunken mistake. No, this was worse. This was something established. Something with weight, history, a whole separate life built in the shadows of the one we were supposed to share. I traced my fingers over the name at the bottom of the letter. AR. Who the hell was AR? The name meant nothing to me, but the words on the page burned. You belong in my arms, always. I clenched my fists, crumpling the letter, my mind replaying every moment over the past few months where I had doubted myself, the times she had pulled away from me, the excuses that now seemed so obvious. I had been a fool, but that ended tonight. Looking for clues, I moved through the apartment, forcing myself to stay level-headed. This wasn't the time for blind rage. This was the time to gather proof. Because this wasn't just about confronting her. It was about destroying the illusion she had so carefully crafted. On the dresser, I found more traces of her double life. Jewelry I had never seen. Designer perfume I didn't recognize. The closet was filled with clothes I had never watched her slip into before. Dresses far more expensive than what we usually bought. Who was paying for all this? Then, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. A framed photo sitting on the bedside table. My wife, smiling, and next to her, a man, tall, well-dressed, confident. His arm was wrapped around her waist like she belonged to him. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had spent years loving a woman who, apparently, belonged to someone else. The call that changed everything. I pulled out my phone, my hands tightening around it like a lifeline. I needed information. I needed to know who I was dealing with. I snapped a picture of the letter, the apartment, the photo, proof. Then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a private investigator. The number belonged to an old friend, Luke, who had once worked cases for corporate fraud but dabbled in personal investigations. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew he was the kind of guy who got answers. Look, I said the moment he picked up. I need your help. Daniel? His voice was groggy, like I'd woken him up. Shit, man, haven't heard from you in? I don't have time to catch up. I took a steadying breath. My wife is having an affair, and I need to know everything about the man she's seeing. There was a pause, then a quiet, knowing sigh. Send me what you have. I did. The letter, the address, the photo of the man. Luke didn't ask any questions. He just said, I'll get back to you soon. The lie she told me. By the time I left the apartment, it was past 10. The city lights blurred as I drove, my mind in chaos. When I pulled into my driveway, Julia's car was already there. Still at work? Huh? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more. I walked into the house, and there she was, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up when she saw me and smiled. A smile that had been given to someone else earlier that night. Hey, babe, she said casually. You're home late. I studied her, taking in every detail. The same face I had kissed 1,000 times. The same lips that had whispered I love you. The same hands that had once reached for me in the dark. Now, she was a stranger. I forced a smile. Got caught up at work. She sighed dramatically, setting her phone down. Me too. I swear. My boss is going to drive me insane. I was stuck in meetings all night. All night. My fingers curled into my palms. I had just left the apartment she swore didn't exist. I had just seen the evidence of the life she had built behind my back. And yet, here she was, lying to my face like it was second nature. But now I knew the truth. And she had no idea that her time was running out. I stared at Julia, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the kitchen lights, her lips pursed around the rim of her wine glass as she took a slow sip. She had no idea. No clue that I had just come from the apartment she thought was her secret. No clue that I had stood in the middle of her other life, holding a love letter from a man who wasn't me. And yet, she sat here, looking comfortable, carefree. How long has she been lying to me like this? I forced myself to relax, slipping into the role I had to play. The clueless husband. That bad, huh? I said, feigning exhaustion as I loosened my tie and walked toward the fridge. Julia sighed and leaned back in her chair. You have no idea. I swear. My boss is the most insufferable man alive. He's constantly keeping us late with last-minute reports and meetings. I barely had time to eat. I nodded, my fingers tightening around the refrigerator handle. Lie. I had been in her real life just an hour ago, and she wasn't stuck in a meeting. She was drinking wine in a luxury apartment, wrapped in a world that didn't include me. It made me wonder just how much of the past 6 months had been fabricated. I turned back to her, forcing an easy smile. You should talk to HR or something. That sounds like a nightmare. She laughed, shaking her head. Oh, it's fine. I can handle it. I bet you can, I thought bitterly. As she spoke, I studied her. The way her fingers absent-mindedly traced the stem of the wine glass. The way she avoided meeting my eyes for too long. Was she thinking of him? Did she feel even an ounce of guilt? I wanted to call her out right then and there. Wanted to throw the lease, the love letter, the photo of her with him onto the table and watch the mask fall away. But no, not yet. She had played me for months. I wanted her to squirm. The first test. I sat down across from her, drumming my fingers on the table. So, what's the plan for the weekend? Feel like getting out of town? She blinked, caught off guard. This weekend? Yeah. I was thinking a little getaway. Just us. I watched her carefully. She hesitated. There it is. Oh, babe, she sighed, rubbing her temple. This weekend's going to be crazy at work. They're having me train a new client, and I'll probably be in and out of meetings all Saturday. I tilted my head. Really? That sucks. Lie. She had just lied again without missing a beat. She was confident, too confident. I bet she had done this so many times that she no longer even considered the possibility of being caught. I gave a slow nod, pretending to buy it. Well, let me know if things change. We could use some time together. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We'll figure something out soon, I promise. I squeezed back, holding her gaze. Sooner than you think. Luke's findings. The next morning, I woke up early. Julia was still asleep, her body tangled in the sheets like she had no weight on her conscience. I checked my phone. Luke, meet me at my office. We need to talk. I slipped out of bed, dressed quickly, and left the house before she even stirred. By the time I arrived at Luke's office, a small, no-nonsense space above a pawn shop, he was already waiting with a folder in hand. You're not gonna like this, he said, pushing the file toward me. I flipped it open, and the first thing I saw was his face. AR, the man from the photo, the one standing next to my wife, grinning like he had already won. I clenched my jaw. Who is he? Luke sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. His name is Alexander Reed. Wealthy investor. Works in real estate development. Divorced, no kids. From what I found, he's been seeing Julia for at least 7 months. 7 months. I forced myself to stay calm, flipping through the pages. Bank transactions. Reservations at high-end hotels. A private yacht rental in Miami, dated 3 months ago. She told me she was on a business trip, I muttered, my grip tightening on the paper. Luke exhaled sharply. She wasn't. She was on a vacation with him. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Luke leaned forward. What do you want to do, man? I can get more if you need it. But at this point, we already have enough to. No, I interrupted. Not yet. Luke frowned. You sure? We could hit her with this today. I exhaled slowly. I'm not just gonna end this quietly. I want her to feel this. To watch everything she built with him collapse. Luke studied me for a moment, then smirked. All right, what's the plan? I tapped the folder. She has a party coming up, right? A work event? Luke nodded. Yeah, big corporate thing. Black tie. She RSVP'd with him as her guest. My stomach twisted. She was planning to introduce him, publicly. Not as her business associate. Not as some secret fling. As her partner. Over my dead body. A slow, dark smile spread across my face. Perfect, I said. That's where we'll end this. Luke raised an eyebrow. You want to expose her there? Oh, I don't just want to expose her, I said. I want to ruin her. I left Luke's office with my mind racing, my pulse thrumming with a dark kind of energy. For months, Julia had been playing me, weaving her lies so effortlessly, she must have thought I'd never see through them. But now, I was the one in control. She had planned to reveal her affair on her terms, parading Alexander Reed around like some prize she had won. Not gonna happen. I wanted her downfall to be public, brutal, and undeniable. And her corporate gala? That was going to be the perfect stage, laying the groundwork. That night, I played my part flawlessly. Julia came home late, as expected, and kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I forced myself to smile, to let her believe she was still pulling the strings. I was thinking, I said over dinner, watching her twirl pasta around her fork, we should go to your work event together. She froze for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle. Anyone else might have missed it. Oh, babe, you hate those things, she said, laughing lightly. It's all corporate talk and networking. Super boring. Lie. She just didn't want me there. I shrugged. I know, but I figured it'd be good for me to show my support. Besides, it's been a while since we had a fancy night out. She hesitated, then gave me a tight-lipped smile. That's sweet, but I already RSVP'd. It's kinda last minute to change things now. Who'd you list as your plus one? I asked, feigning innocence. Another pause. Just a little too long. Lisa from marketing, she answered smoothly. We always go together. I smiled. Great. I'll get my tux ready. Her lips parted, her eyes flashing with panic before she could hide it. I don't think you can just show up, Daniel. It's a guest list event. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my wine. That's fine. I'll talk to Lisa. I'm sure she won't mind giving up her spot for your husband. Checkmate. She had to say yes. Refusing me would seem suspicious, even to herself. She swallowed hard, then forced another fake smile. Of course, babe. That'd be nice. Nice. Oh, Julia. You have no idea. The final pieces. Over the next few days, I worked in the background. I had Luke dig deeper. He got security footage of Julia and Alexander entering their secret apartment together multiple times. No way she could lie her way out of that. I secured my place at the event. Not only was I attending as her real plus one, but I had reached out to her boss directly, mentioning how excited I was to finally meet the important clients she had been working with. He had no idea what I meant, but he was polite enough to tell me he looked forward to seeing me there. I got in touch with Alexander Reed's ex-wife. Turns out, Julia's lover had left behind more than just an empty marriage. He had a reputation. His ex, Vanessa, had no love for him and was more than willing to help me burn it all down. The pieces were in place. And then came the night of the gala. The grand performance. Julia was breathtaking that evening. A deep red dress hugged her body perfectly, her hair styled in soft waves, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman ready to impress. Too bad she'd be leaving in disgrace. We arrived at the venue, a high-end hotel ballroom filled with powerful men in tailored suits and women in elegant gowns. The atmosphere buzzed with champagne-fueled conversation, soft music playing in the background. Julia's hand was stiff in mine as we walked in, her smile forced. She kept glancing around, searching, looking for him. And then I saw Alexander Reed, standing near the bar, completely at ease, his hand wrapped around a glass of whiskey. He looked exactly like the kind of man who thought he could take whatever he wanted and never face consequences. Julia tensed beside me, and I lived for it. I leaned in close, lowering my voice just enough for only her to hear. You seem nervous, babe. Looking for someone? She turned to me with wide eyes, but before she could answer, Daniel, Julia, so glad you made it. Her boss. Julia had no choice but to play along. She greeted him with a strained smile, while I shook his hand, acting like I wasn't seconds away from setting her entire life on fire. The moment of truth. As the night went on, Julia kept trying to slip away, trying to reach him, but every time, I found a way to keep her beside me, my hand firm on her waist, my smile pleasant but knowing. And then, finally, I saw it. The moment her world started to crumble. Across the room, Alexander had been approached by his ex-wife, Vanessa, and she was not being quiet about their past. A few people turned to listen, then more. Whispers spread like wildfire. Isn't that Julia's plus one? She's married, isn't she? Wait, didn't he cheat on his last wife? Julia's grip on her champagne glass tightened. I leaned in, whispering against her ear, "Looks like your date's having a rough night." Her breath hitched. She turned to me slowly, her face pale. "Daniel." I pulled out my phone and held up the photo of her and Alexander at the secret apartment. Her pupils dilated in pure panic. I gave her a slow, satisfied smile. Checkmate. Julia was unraveling before my eyes. Her hands trembled as she gripped her champagne glass, her breathing uneven. The carefully crafted mask she had worn for months, maybe years, was beginning to crack. And I was the one who had struck the first blow. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Across the room, Alexander Reed was drowning. His ex-wife, Vanessa, had made sure of that. She stood in front of him, her voice cutting through the elegant hum of the gala like a blade, ensuring that everyone within earshot heard about his long history of infidelity, financial manipulation, and shady business deals. People whispered. Some pretended to mind their own business, but kept stealing glances at Julia and Alexander. The pieces were falling into place, and Julia knew it. She turned to me, her voice tight. "Daniel, please. Let's go outside and talk." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Why? Something wrong?" Her nails dug into my arm as she tried to keep her voice steady. "Not here." I tilted my head, watching her squirm. "But this is exactly where you plan to introduce him, isn't it?" I gestured toward Alexander, who was looking around in clear distress. "I mean, shouldn't you go save him?" Her face was ghostly pale. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice desperate now. "Please." I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I know everything, Julia." She went still. I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen. The photos of her secret apartment. The security footage of her entering with Alexander. The hotel reservations. Her breath hitched audibly, her fingers twitching toward my phone like she could erase the evidence from existence. I let the moment hang, let the weight of her own betrayal settle onto her shoulders. Then, I delivered the final blow. I turned my phone around, showing her an email draft. To Julia's boss. Subject, employee ethics concern. The attachment? Every single piece of evidence. Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't." I arched an eyebrow. "Wouldn't I?" The humiliation begins. Just then, Vanessa's voice rose over the murmur of the crowd. "You think Julia's any different, Alex?" she scoffed. "You think she won't do to you what she did to her husband?" Heads turned. Julia flinched, her entire body locking up as she realized. All eyes were on her. The whispers grew louder. "Is that Daniel's wife?" God, she really thought no one would find out? They deserve each other. Julia grabbed my wrist, her breathing ragged. "We need to leave." I shrugged her off. "Why? The party's just getting started." Her boss approached then, his expression unreadable. "Julia," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "Why am I just now learning about your outside relationships?" Panic flashed in her eyes. I can explain." "Can you?" He glanced at me, then back at her. "Because right now, I'm seriously reconsidering how much I trust your business dealings." She opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time in forever, Julia had nothing to say, and I savored every second of it. The death of her lies. Alexander was already trying to slip away, but Vanessa wasn't letting him go quietly. She continued exposing his past sins, listing every deal he had manipulated, every person he had screwed over. The attention was overwhelming. Julia's world was crumbling from every angle. Her lover? Ruined in front of everyone. Her boss? Doubtful of her integrity. Her husband? Completely in control. She turned to me one last time, her lower lip trembling. "Daniel," she whispered, "I know I messed up, but we can fix this." I tilted my head, as if considering it. Then I said the words she never expected to hear. "There's nothing left to fix." And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing in the center of the ballroom, her betrayal exposed, her carefully built illusion shattered. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The moment I walked away, I could feel Julia's world collapsing behind me. The whispers, the judgmental glances, the way her boss turned his back on her. It was all happening exactly the way I had planned. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The aftermath. I left the ballroom, stepping out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, crisp, almost cleansing. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. I had spent months drowning in uncertainty and self-doubt, second-guessing every late-night meeting, every unexplained absence. And all along, she had been treating me like an idiot, smiling in my face, lying to me so effortlessly that I had started to question my own sanity. But now, the truth was out, and she had nowhere to hide. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Julia. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before answering. Her voice was frantic. Daniel, please, where are you? We need to talk. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to squirm. Why? I finally said, my voice cold. Don't you have someone else to run to? She let out a shaky breath. It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly. Really? Because I think you've been screwing another man for 7 months in a secret apartment that I just found out about. She inhaled sharply. I was going to tell you. I cut her off. Were you? Before or after you introduced him to your colleagues as your new boyfriend? Silence. I could almost hear her brain scrambling for an excuse, a way to twist the narrative in her favor. But she had nothing. So she did what cheaters always do when they get caught. She begged. Daniel, she whispered, her voice breaking. You and we've been together for so long. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but... I barked out a humorless laugh. A mistake? A mistake was forgetting an anniversary. A mistake was saying something in anger that you didn't mean. This was a calculated, months-long betrayal. I heard her sniffle. I still love you. I went still. And then I said the words I knew would cut her deeper than any insult, any public humiliation. No, you don't. She let out a strangled sob. Yes, I do. You're my husband, Daniel. I was just lost. I got caught up in something, and I didn't know how to stop. I shook my head. You did know how to stop. You just didn't want to. Silence. She knew I was right. And I knew, in that moment, that I was done. One last lie. I took a slow breath, letting the anger settle into something calmer, something stronger. You don't love me, Julia, I said, my voice eerily steady. You just love the security I gave you. You love the fact that no matter what, I was always there. That I made you feel safe while you ran around behind my back. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. Come home, she pleaded. Let's talk in private. Please, Daniel. We can figure this out. I smiled to myself. Sure, I lied. I'll be home soon. And then I hung up. Because I wasn't going home. Not yet. I had one more thing to do first. Julia thought she still had control. She thought I'd come home, that she could spin this into some kind of emotional misunderstanding, that if she cried enough, I'd be weak enough to listen. But she didn't realize. I wasn't the same man she had been lying to for months. She had already lost me. And now, I was going to take everything she cared about. One final stop. Instead of driving home, I went to her apartment. Not our home. Not the place we had built together over the years. No, I went to the secret luxury apartment, the one she had been using as her love nest. The doorman barely glanced at me as I walked in. Julia had probably been here so often that no one questioned her guests. But this time, I wasn't here to play the fool. I stepped inside and let the door swing shut behind me. The scent of expensive candles still lingered in the air. The wine glasses were still on the counter, one with lipstick on the rim, the other left unfinished. How many nights had they spent here together? How many times had she come home to me after being in this bed with him? I felt the anger surge, hot and bitter, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't here to rage. I was here to end this, destroying her illusion. I walked through the apartment, taking everything that proved her betrayal. The love letters from Alexander. The receipts for expensive gifts he had bought her. The photos of them together, laughing, holding each other like they had nothing to hide. Every single thing that tied Julia to this place. I gathered into a neat little folder. Then, for the final touch, I grabbed a bottle of red wine from the counter, walked into the bedroom, and, without a second thought, poured it all over their bed. Let her try to explain that to him. Back to the lion's den. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was past midnight. Julia was waiting at the window, pacing. The second she saw my car, she ran to the front door, throwing it open before I even stepped out. "Daniel," she gasped, her eyes wide, her face streaked with tears. "Thank God. I was so scared you wouldn't come back." I shut the car door and met her gaze. "Why?" She flinched at the coldness in my voice. Because I love you. We can work through this, baby. I just need you to understand that it didn't mean anything." I let out a slow breath, pretending to think. Then I pulled out the folder. Her face drained of color. I shoved it into her hands. "Go ahead, Julia. Explain these." She flipped it open, and the moment she saw the photo of her and Alexander kissing, she staggered back. I crossed my arms. "What's wrong? You said it didn't mean anything, right?" She swallowed hard. Daniel, I was confused." "No," I cut her off. "Confused is accidentally kissing someone at a party. Confused is one mistake, not a 7-month-long affair in a secret apartment." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It wasn't just about him. I was lost in our marriage. I felt like we were becoming strangers, and So you decided to become a stranger in another man's bed?" I shot back. She sobbed. "I swear, I was going to end it. I just didn't know how." I laughed. A dark, bitter laugh. "Oh, you were gonna end it? What a coincidence. So was I." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I mean, I already called a divorce lawyer, Julia." She froze. Then her face crumbled. No, no, you don't mean that. You're just angry. You'll change your mind when we talk this through." I held up my hand. "We're done, Julia." She collapsed onto her knees, shaking her head violently, gripping my sleeve like she could physically hold onto our marriage. "Daniel, please. I will do anything. I will cut him off. I will quit my job. I will." "No." Her mouth snapped shut. I stared down at her, completely unaffected. "You don't get to negotiate your way out of this. You don't get to cry your way back into my life," I said, my voice firm. "You chose this. And now? I'm choosing to leave." Her lips trembled. I don't want to lose you." I gave her a cold, emotionless smile. "You already did." Then I turned away, walking toward the bedroom. Because I had one final move to make before this was over. Julia was still kneeling on the floor when I left her there. Her shoulders shook, her sobs echoing through the house. A week ago, I might have felt something. Guilt, sympathy, even an ounce of pain for the woman I once loved. Now, I only felt satisfaction. Because I wasn't just leaving her. I was going to make sure she walked away with nothing. Preparing the endgame. I went into our bedroom. The room we had shared for years. The room where I once felt safe beside her. But tonight, I wasn't here to sleep. I was here to pack. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started removing my life from hers. Clothes, important documents, my laptop, anything that belonged to me, anything that she couldn't twist into leverage. As I zipped up the bag, my phone buzzed. "Luke." I picked up immediately. "Tell me you have it." His voice was smug. "Oh, I have everything. Your lawyer is gonna have a field day with this." I smirked. Good. Luke had managed to pull financial records, tracking Julia's spending to see exactly how much of my money had gone into her secret life. The gifts, the luxury apartment, the weekend getaways, all of it paid for with our shared accounts. That meant one thing. When I filed for divorce, I wouldn't just be leaving her. I'd be leaving her broke. The last conversation. By the time I stepped out of the bedroom, Julia had pulled herself together. She stood in the dimly lit hallway, her arms wrapped around herself, her makeup smudged from crying. "You're really leaving," she whispered. I slung the bag over my shoulder. "Yeah, I am." Her breath hitched. "Daniel, please. Don't throw this away. We've been together for 10 years. We can fix it." I stared at her. "You didn't care about those 10 years when you were with him?" She flinched like I had slapped her. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of her own destruction. Then, just to twist the knife deeper, I said, "Oh, and Julia? You might want to find a new place to live." Her forehead creased. "What?" I smiled, slow, deliberate. "The lease for your little love nest? It was in your name. But the money?" I tilted my head. "That was ours. And my lawyer is already on it." Her lips parted in horror. "Daniel, you wouldn't." "I already did." Her breathing turned frantic. I'll have nothing." I shrugged. "Not my problem." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. The walk away. I turned toward the door. Julia lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. "Daniel, please. I love you." I pulled away easily, stepping back. Then I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "No, you don't." And then I walked out the door, leaving her behind, broken and alone. I didn't look back as I left. Not when I heard Julia collapse against the doorframe, sobbing. Not when she whispered my name like it was the only thing keeping her standing. I walked to my car, tossed my bag in the back seat, and drove off, leaving behind the wreckage of a marriage she had burned to the ground. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't the end. Julia wasn't the kind of woman to accept defeat. She had spent months lying, manipulating, and playing a double life. She wouldn't let go that easily. And sure enough, she started crawling back within hours. The first attempt, the late-night calls. By the time I checked into my hotel, my phone had already blown up with messages. "Julia, Daniel, please. Just talk to me. Julia, we can fix this. Don't throw us away. Julia, I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want. Julia, I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. I love you. Julia, please answer me. I'm begging you." I didn't respond. She called. Again and again. I let it ring. Let her sit in the silence she had created for herself. At 3 a.m., she left a voicemail. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. Her voice was raw, shaking. "Daniel, I don't know what to do without you. I can't sleep. I can't think. It choked sob. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please don't shut me out. Just tell me what to do." I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone. For a second, a small part of me, the old me, felt something. Then I remembered the love letter I had found in her secret apartment. "You belong in my arms, always." And just like that, my pity turned to disgust. I deleted the voicemail. The second attempt, the surprise visit. The next morning, I left my hotel early to meet with my lawyer. I had barely stepped into the parking lot when I saw her car. Julia, standing there, waiting. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair unbrushed, her clothes thrown on like she had barely managed to get dressed. For a split second, she just stared at me, like she didn't know if she had the right to speak. Then, with a shaky breath, she rushed toward me. "Daniel," she gasped. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." I crossed my arms, keeping my expression blank. "Why?" She flinched at my coldness. "Because, I need to say this in person." I sighed, looking at my watch. "Fine. 5 minutes." She practically collapsed in relief. The breakdown. "I know you hate me," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "I know I ruined everything. And I swear, if I could take it back, I would. If I could erase what I did, I would." I didn't say a word. She swallowed hard, tears spilling over. "But I was stupid, Daniel. I got lost in something that wasn't real. It was a fantasy, okay? I never wanted to lose you." I arched an eyebrow. "You did lose me." She let out a broken sob. I know I did. But please, Daniel, I don't care about him. I never really did. It was just, he made me feel wanted, and I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh. "Wanted?" I repeated. "Julia, you had a husband who loved you. A husband who was faithful to you. And you threw that away for a man who was using you just as much as you were using him." She shook her head violently. "It wasn't like that. Wasn't it?" I took a step forward, lowering my voice. Tell me, Julia, where is Alexander now? Her face crumpled. I smirked. Oh, that's right. He's gone. And that was the truth. The moment Alexander Reed realized his reputation had been torched, he had cut and run, blocking Julia, deleting their messages, and pretending she had never existed. She had lost everything, and now she was desperately clinging to me, the husband she thought would always be there, no matter how much she betrayed me. Pathetic. The last plea. She reached for my hand. Daniel, I don't want to lose you. Please, just give me one more chance. I pulled away easily. Why would I do that? Her lip trembled. Because you love me. For a moment, I just stared at her. Then, I leaned in close, letting her see the finality in my eyes. I did love you, I murmured. But the woman I loved doesn't exist anymore. Her breath hitched. I stepped back, my voice hardening. We're done, Julia. And then I walked past her, leaving her exactly where she left me months ago, alone and broken. Julia had lost. She just didn't realize how much further she could fall. I walked away from her that morning, expecting it to be the end, expecting her to finally accept her fate and disappear from my life forever. But cheaters don't just lose and walk away. They spiral. And Julia? She was about to hit rock bottom. The final attempt. I had just finished signing the first set of divorce papers when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned but answered anyway. Yeah. A quiet breath. Then, Daniel. Julia. I closed my eyes, exhaling through my nose. Julia, stop calling me. Wait, please, she begged. I need to talk to you. One last time. I can't do this without you. I almost laughed. Without me? I repeated. Julia, you've been doing things without me for 7 months. She let out a shaky sob. I know I don't deserve another chance, but Daniel, I don't have anywhere else to go. There it was. Her voice was drenched in desperation. Because this wasn't just about losing me anymore. This was about losing everything. Her job? Gone. After her boss found out about her business relationships, her career went up in flames. Her secret apartment? Evicted. She couldn't afford the rent without me. Her lover? Disappeared. Alexander dropped her the second his name got dragged through the mud. She had nothing left. And now, she was begging me. I smiled to myself. Good. The last meeting. I agreed to meet her. Not because I wanted to reconcile. I wanted to see her fall apart. When I arrived at the cafe, I barely recognized her. Her once perfectly styled hair was a mess. Dark circles hung under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She looks exactly how I felt when I first found out. She looked broken. I sat down across from her. Talk. She swallowed hard. I need your help. I tilted my head. Help with what? She stared at her hands, twisting them together. I lost my job. My savings are gone. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Then I said, not my problem. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. Daniel, please. You can't just leave me like this. I have nothing. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Oh, and whose fault is that? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I messed up. I made a mistake. But you're my husband. We're supposed to? No, I cut her off coldly. We are nothing. You killed our marriage the moment you started sleeping with him. She sputtered, grasping for anything to cling to. But I love you. I laughed. No, Julia, you don't. She flinched. I leaned in, my voice calm. You love comfort. You love security. You love having someone who will always be there for you, no matter how much you screw up. Her breathing hitched. I smirked. But you lost that. You lost me. She sobbed. I don't know how to fix this. I stood up, grabbing my jacket. You don't, I said simply. Then, without another word, I walked out, leaving her alone. For good. Julia was gone. For months, she had lived a double life, playing me for a fool while she built something with him. And now, she had nothing. And me? For the first time in a long time, I was free. The fresh start. A week after our last meeting, I finalized the divorce papers. She got nothing from me. She had nowhere to go. She was officially out of my life. I should have felt empty. After all, I had spent 10 years building a life with this woman. I had loved her, trusted her, believed we were a team. But when I walked out of that lawyer's office, I didn't feel pain. I felt relief. That same night, Luke called me. "She's still trying to reach you," he said. "Texts, emails, hell. She even tried showing up at your old house." I chuckled. Let her. I'm done. And I was. She could beg, cry, and plead all she wanted. It wouldn't change a thing. Because now, I had a future to build. A new chapter. I spent the next few weeks reclaiming my life. I moved out of the city, getting a place by the water. I cut out everyone who sided with Julia, the mutual friends who made excuses for her, who told me to forgive. I started focusing on myself, my work, my hobbies, things I had neglected for years. And then, I met someone new. Her name was Claire. We met at a bookstore, of all places. She was reaching for a novel, and I grabbed the same one by accident. Our hands brushed, we laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something real. She wasn't Julia. She didn't make me second-guess myself, didn't hide things, didn't make me feel like I was walking on unstable ground. She was warm, honest, different. And when she smiled at me, I didn't think about the past. I thought about the future. Julia's final message. One night, as I was driving home from dinner with Claire, my phone buzzed. A new email. From Julia. I almost deleted it without reading. But then I thought, what could she possibly have left to say? So I opened it. "Daniel, I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. But I just needed to say this one last time. I messed up. I lost everything. And I can't fix it. But you deserved better. You always did. I hope you find happiness again. Julia." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger or pain. I felt nothing. And that's when I knew. I had one. Julia was nothing more than a memory now. The woman who had spent months lying to me, betraying me, making me feel like I was nothing. She was finally out of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The last goodbye. I never responded to her email. She wanted closure. She wanted to be forgiven so she could sleep better at night. But she didn't get to have that. Because some betrayals don't deserve closure. Some betrayals deserve to be left behind. So I did exactly that. I blocked her email, deleted our old photos, and erased every trace of her from my life. And it felt damn good. The new beginning. Claire and I kept seeing each other. Slowly, carefully. She wasn't a rebound. She wasn't a distraction. She was something real. One evening, as we walked along the beach, she slipped her hand into mine and smiled. "You seem different lately," she said softly. I glanced at her. Different how? She squeezed my fingers. Lighter. And she was right. The weight of Julia, the betrayal, the pain, it was gone. I had spent so long being angry, so long plotting my revenge, that I forgot what it felt like to just live. But now, I was finally doing it. Without Julia. Without the past holding me back. Just me and the future ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.